Hello, everybody. How you doing today? This is Saucony Prince of SauconyPrince.com, where we make motivation personal. We're introducing you to yourself. And I want to welcome you to the H.E.A.L podcast. H.E.A.L is an acronym for Help, Elevate, and Learn. And it's based on my latest book with the same title, but the subtitle is It's a Guide to Healing Your Inner Child. I'm super excited today because I have a guest that I know is going to help us, all of us, get to a better space and a better place when it comes to our inner child wounds, our inner child trauma, but more importantly, our inner child healing. But as always, I got to thank our sponsor of this amazing episode, none other than BetterHelp. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, BetterHelp.com/SauconyPrinceHeal. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who's had years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or your computer, via a phone call, a video chat, or messaging. However you feel most comfortable. It is the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started fast. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit BetterHelp.com/SauconyPrinceHeal or choose Saucony Prince Heal during your sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. And again, we want to thank BetterHelp for being our sponsor of this episode. And I can't tell you how important it is to me to actually do these podcasts, because I know that there's somebody somewhere struggling with dealing with their own inner child wounds, their inner child trauma, and they need some help with inner child healing. And like I've said before, we're not here to end the conversation. We just want to start the conversation. And speaking of starting the conversation, I'm ready to have my guest up, none other than Mr. Larry H.E.A.L Sr. Good morning, sir. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you today?
I am well. I am well. Tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Larry C. Hill Sr. I am the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Overcomers Only, Man in Progress.
Okay.
It is a bio of my personal life and some of the amazing opportunities that life has provided for me to be on a platform such as this. They're not all great. Some have been major challenges, but by the grace of God, I'm here, and I'm super excited to be here. But let me make sure I say this. I'm also the husband of Jasmine, and I am the dad of Logan and Layla, LJ, and Lauren. So I'm going to stop there. Thank the Lord. But that is exactly who I am. I'm a son. I'm a brother, just a regular guy that's looking to make an impact on the world. Yes, sir.
Well, again, we thank you for thank you for all that you do for our community and for the people that you've been called to serve. And we're just super excited to have you on our platform. And I know that you're going to share something today that's going to help all of us. So listen, I want to just dive into some of these questions, and I know that your responses are going to be impactful. So the first one that I have is, in your professional opinion or personal opinion, how important is inner child healing?
Oh, it's. I think that's by far one of the most overlooked things that we talk about in our community. And so,
Mhm.
this is my last time giving you props. I'm not giving you no more props the rest of this show. Uh,
It's all
but
good.
this platform is so essential because we don't talk about those little people that we tend to forget about,
Right,
that are us. It's the us's of us, right?
right.
I know you have doctors on here and real smart people, and I'm educated, but I'm a little country too. So I'm going to make sure that I talk about this in ways that are comfortable to me.
Right.
So it's super important, right? If I can share just a short story,
Sure.
part of the reason I wrote this book is because of the need to heal a smaller, younger version of Larry, the
Mm,
baby boy of Larry Hill, right? 4 years old.
right.
At 4 years old, I encountered something traumatic, a very serious tragedy where I witnessed my father laying dead in the driveway of my home
Mm,
as a result of domestic violence. He came to kill my mother, and my mother shot out the window and killed him. And my grandfather at the time brought me to the crime scene because he didn't believe that his son, my dad, was dead. And back then, that was 1978, 1979. I just told how old I am. But to that end, uh, we didn't really do counseling. We didn't do therapy, right? And so I grew up with this thing of being broken as a little boy, not fully understanding why my dad was gone, not understanding the complexity of bad relationships, not understanding the trauma that I would eventually deal with. So it's not just a good idea, it is an imperative step that we all have to take in our
wow.
journey to maturity. So, yeah, that's my long, short answer there.
That's your long, short answer. Well, man, thank you for being transparent and for sharing that part of your story. I know how difficult it can be to go through and to deal with our past, our hurts, our traumas. In fact, I've had several people on the show talk about how, you know, stuff can be so traumatic that we can block it out mentally. You know, Hey, but the thing of it is that it's still running, like a program in the background. It's still running and it's still impacting and it's still affecting our lives. And that's one of the reasons why, again, I wanted to write this book and I wanted to have this podcast because I wanted to give a voice to that part of ourselves that we sometimes overlook, sometimes we ignore, sometimes we pacify, sometimes we locked it away. But we wonder why there's a hollowness in us. And I know that taking the steps, and I posted this several months ago, but it's still true. And I said that the bravest thing you can do is to heal from your hurt.
Mm,
The bravest thing you can do is to heal from your hurt because it takes courage to go and to address that part of ourselves that was wounded and that was damaged. It takes courage for us to go and to get the help that we need. And I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but it's important for us to be able to actually prioritize that because if we don't, again, it'll keep coming up, it'll keep coming back. I tell people you can pull all the leaves off a tree, but that don't mean it's going to die. It's just going to you just pruned it. It's going to bloom again.
right, right.
Until we get to the root of the issue, until we get to the root of the problem, it's going to keep coming up.
And,
So
can I just interject really quick
yes,
because I
sir.
think that's a powerful statement. The thing that I've kind of it's kind of become my playbook is going through this process of evaluating the need to be healed. To your point, which is so
Right,
critical, right?
right.
It's the need to be healed. Um, I'll say men, often trick ourselves or convince ourselves that we're healed, and in
Okay.
some ways, that's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, we're healed incorrectly.
Ooh, okay. Unpack that.
And being healed incorrectly means that you may not necessarily see the trauma of what was broken or what was damaged, right? So the skin is healed, it's repaired itself, but there's a limp associated with your heel, right? Because it wasn't set correctly. It's like breaking a bone and never going to the doctor, right?
Right,
Eventually, because you're human and the way God created us, that bone will fuse back together, but it'll
right,
have a lump in it. The
right.
use of the use of the arm or the leg will not be at the level that it was created to be. And that's what a lot of times we walk around with. We
Mm,
walk around with limits to what God created us to be because we weren't healed correctly.
mm,
And a lot of times, what has to happen is you have to go in, they have to reopen the wound, they got to set that bone correctly so that you can heal correctly, not just eradicate or remove the symptom of what we saw, the trauma. And I
right.
think that's where I had to go. I had to go to a place of, you know what, I'm 40 years old and this still hurts, to your point.
Mm,
I'm 40 years old and it still bothers me. Why am I still limping? Right? I should have been over this. And the truth
right,
of the
right.
matter is that it never healed correctly. So now that's when the work has to happen. That's where the honesty has to happen. That's where the transparency has to happen. That's when you go back to 4 years old and you say things like, "Oh my God, I miss my daddy." And it's like,
Right,
okay, you 40 plus. Why are you missing your daddy? Because I never healed correctly.
right.
And so, yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject, to that. So,
No, no, man. And I am glad that you did, because it's information like that that really causes us to reevaluate the process. Because, yeah, like you said, we can heal, but are we healing correctly? And I'm glad that you interjected that, because I believe that's so important. And it's going to come out in some of the other questions. And so I'll actually circle back around to that back when we get to that. But the second question is, in your opinion, when should someone start inner child work?
that's a great question. I think it's a difficult question because um, you have children, I have children. I think one of the best things we can teach our children is to deal with things when they happen, right?
Yes, yes,
Uh, I came up in a generation where suppression was my portion. Push it
mm,
down, it don't exist, it's not important.
mine too.
Uh, and so it didn't become a need or even something that I identified until I was older in life. And actually, it didn't really become a need until I had kids. When I saw my behavior affecting their behavior, then it
Right,
was like, okay, something's wrong with me. And
right,
that's hard to say. But I think the correct answer is being in a position, being in an environment where you are dealing with childish things as a child, not childish thing as an adult, right? So as soon
right,
as possible, uh, and then being able to be comfortable with. Here's the thing, man. I wasn't allowed to say how I felt. That was not allowed. I couldn't say, mama, what you said is not honest, right?
right, right.
You couldn't say certain.
You couldn't say, "Mama, you lied," because
Yeah,
that'll be
yeah,
all
yeah,
your teeth gone.
you ain't got no teeth. Bottom lip gone. Top lip is just destroyed. But there were times where mama probably wasn't being honest,
Mm,
and the lack of honesty affected how I saw communication. And
right,
so it changed something in me, right? It really changed the foundational truths of what integrity looks like. So you grew up building blocks that were based on your inability to communicate, talk through, and heal from those things that damaged you as a child. So the answer is as soon as possible. The
right.
comma is as soon as you recognize the need for
Mm, that's true. That's true. And that really echoes a lot of what I tell people about the how your current day behavior was seeded in your childhood. And if you don't recognize that those two are connected, you'll just keep repeating the same pattern. If you never understand the why, you'll keep repeating the what.
it. Yep.
But understanding the why you do what you do, because I tell people it's not what you do, but why.
Yep.
Understanding, in fact, the why, it gives you at least a starting point to deal with the what. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. As you were talking, I was thinking of the scripture where Paul said, like, when I was a child, I spake as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. And that is a process of actually seeing and looking back on just the mindset and the thought process that we had, because honestly, as children, we didn't have the vocabulary, as Dr. Charles Dent would tell us, to articulate what was happening to us and how it was making us feel and what it was doing to us. We knew something was happening and we didn't like it, but we didn't know how to articulate it, describe it, or even deal with it. And we were just going through it. But
Mhm.
now we have an opportunity as adults to process that and to heal correctly, as opposed to just taking what was handed to us and saying, well, okay, it is what it is. Well, we can actually, and it's work. It's work. I don't want anybody to think that doing this is going to be a walk in the park. It's a construction process. And I was telling somebody just the other day, before you can put up something new, you have to tear down the old.
Absolutely.
You have to,
Absolutely.
and that, depending upon how it was built, even that can be a process. But I digress. But
So,
yeah, great.
but before you leave that moment, the great
Uh-huh.
excavation process
Mm,
is something that we never ever want to talk about. Even if you
mm,
go build a house, people don't talk about how dirty the house is before you move in.
right,
Nobody wants to talk about all the dirt and the mud. And I built a house several years ago, and we was walking through, and they building the house, and there's cups in the walls, and it's just
right. Framed up.
it's framed up, and the framers then left stuff there. And that's sometimes what happens in us spiritually and emotionally.
Mm,
People are building us, and they leave stuff that was never supposed to be there. And
wow.
if you don't walk through those areas of your life, you won't even identify that
Mm,
something's off. It's the
mm,
great excavation process. You're right. You tear it down. But if you want to build something tall, if you want something to actually have the ability to grow and scale your life, your purpose, what God has called you for, you got to
right.
go deep.
Yep.
You
That's
you
true.
don't you don't build surface level things to erect skyscrapers. It doesn't work.
Nope.
And a lot of
Nope.
times, what we want to do is we want to make everything surface. We want to let's pour a basic foundation and let's
Right.
go as high as we can. And the winds of life do not support that thinking. You're going to sway, you're going to
Right.
fall, it's going to happen. And so, I would just encourage your listeners is if you're in a season where you're identifying, hey, what's up with that baby? What's up with that kid? What's up with that broken place? You got to go deep.
Yep.
That's great excavation. And it's
Yep.
dirty. Your nails get dirty. You're going to find stuff you didn't want to find out about grandmama and big mom and generational cycles. You're going to see all that stuff, but
Right.
it will help you erect and become the purpose and the promise of God that He has on your life and for your life.
And that is, man, that is so, so true. So, so, man, we're going to be here 2 hours.
No, I gotta get some chicken. I'm playing. I'm playing, man. Go ahead.
All
I'm
right,
here for
man.
you. I'm here.
It's sad. All right. Our third question is, how does trauma show up in life and relationships?
It knocks on your door,
Mm,
literally, figuratively, and you open it. You
mm,
open it because in most cases, trauma is something you become familiar with.
mm,
We did a conversation a couple weeks ago on tragedy, trauma, and triggers, and how they
mm,
all married to each other. They
mm,
interconnect.
mm.
And normally there's tragedy, and then as a
Right.
result of the tragedy, there's trauma, right? And then as a
Exactly.
result of the trauma, there's triggers.
Right.
And what we settled on was you have to learn how to disarm the trigger.
Mm,
You have to release and forgive the person that contributed to the trauma in your life.
right.
Again, that's work. That's not easy. I am not that turn the other cheek cat. I try to be most of the time, but
Right.
you hit me. There was a
We all
song
struggle
out.
with that.
Man, look, it was a song out. Don't try Jesus. Don't try me. I'm
Because I
still,
fight.
because I fight. I'm still, I'm trying to get to that place where I don't fight. Uh, but I think that's something that happens. We encounter things because we haven't dealt with the triggers that bring us back to the trauma, that
Right.
reminds us of the tragedy. And so something as simple as um, you know, you feel disrespected. Somebody
Mm,
say something to you and you don't like the tone. And it
right.
takes you back. Here's it. It takes you back to when you were 5 and you didn't have a voice.
Right.
And so all you ever wanted to do was be heard.
Right.
So when people cut you off, you get triggered. We don't always see that as trauma, but it is.
Yep.
So now you triggered and people think you crazy because such and such did was said something you ain't like. And now you screaming and hollering and people trying to take you out to church because, whatever. But you understand what I'm saying? So
Right.
I think I think essentially what happens is we try to act again. We turn a blind eye to these things as if they don't exist, but ultimately they exist in a way that
Mm,
continue to show up until we deal with them. Right?
mm,
They show up in marriages, they show up in family, they show up in basic relationships, they show up in community relationships because you are triggered. You're just waiting for somebody to light your fuse.
mm, mm. That is so true. I actually did a worksheet entitled Trauma Triggers Reaction Response,
Hmm.
because the trauma happens, which causes the trigger, and
Mm-hmm.
the trigger generally gets a reaction,
Mm-hmm.
but we want to change the reaction to a response. But we have
Mm-hmm.
to identify the trauma first
Absolutely.
and understand what that trauma is triggering. And then we have to watch ourselves in those situations, in those circumstances. And then when we normally want to react, we have to say, okay, I'm 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 having to process and pivot, because I would normally say this or do this, but now I am reprogramming myself. So I'm having a
Mm-hmm.
response. And I talk about this when it comes to telemarketers. If you've ever been on the phone with them, they'll ask you something, you'll say something else. They'll ask you something else, you'll say something else. You are reacting, they are responding, because they have a list.
Mm-hmm.
If if
Mm-hmm.
if he or she says this, well, you say this. If they say
Mm-hmm.
this, you say this. If they object to this, you do this. And so
Absolutely.
what happens is they have a response for any objection, for anything, any obstacle that you put in front of them. But that's because they have trained themselves. And I tell people all the time, we don't have first reactors, we have
Mm.
first responders.
Responders.
they
That's good.
they are trained to respond to a particular situation, whether it's a natural disaster, a man-made disaster, an accident, in fact, whatever. They are trained to respond, and in
Mm-hmm.
that response, there is. I'm not going to say there's no emotion, but there's little emotion,
Mm-hmm.
because they know that they have to focus, because it's a life and death situation. You know, Lives and property are at stake. I think of firefighters. I think of people that are responding to hurricanes or floods. I mean, people have literally, okay, we got to get this person out of this car before he gets swept away. Yeah, so you can say how bad it is, but that's not getting caught up in your emotions, is not getting you to the point to where you're helping a person. So,
And
go ahead.
can I interject? I think that's powerful, man. First off, I think that's powerful. I said I wasn't gonna give you props no more to show, but I think I have to give you props again. Uh, so I think what you said carries such a natural uh connotation, right? It does. It's you can see it in the natural, but it's also that in the spiritual and emotion pieces of what we deal with. And right, it shouldn't have a lot of emotions, but what we should always consider is that level of empathy that those people walk into that room with, into those situations with.
Right, right.
They have to care about what they're dealing with to
Mm-hmm.
dedicate themselves to what they're dealing with, right?
Right.
I learned that from my wife. My wife worked in ER forever, and
Mm,
something would happen, and she would be stone faced. The kids bleeding, and she just like, and I'm tripping, I'm going crazy,
right,
and it wasn't that she didn't care about it. She understood the severity of it. She
right.
cared enough to do it, to stay in control, to manage it. And I think that's what we have to learn to do with our emotions and our
Yes,
traumas, right? We have to
yes.
care enough to be invested,
Right.
to take that approach that you just discussed. And
Yeah.
so yeah, man, I had to say that. It's my last time giving you props, no more, I promise. This is it.
All right.
Don't ask me. Don't ask me.
Saucony 3, Larry, how many? 1, 2?
None. Zero. You ain't gave me none.
Hey, man, listen, I told you I appreciate the service that you do. And of course, the podcast is still going on. So we'll get to that too, man. We'll get to that too. Because
I'm with it, man.
I really want to help all of us to understand that, and I say this all the time, what happened to you may not have been your fault, but it's your responsibility. And what I mean by that is that what happened to you may not have been your fault, but your healing is your responsibility.
That's good.
It's your responsibility, and we have to make sure that we are intentional about that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share this, and I'm gonna move on. Several months ago, we had a storm come through, and it blew a tree down on a house that's literally like, as soon as I walk out my back door, I can see it because it's in the street behind me, and the tree was on the house. And I asked the question, who's responsible for fixing the roof? It's not the tree. The tree can't fix it, even if it wanted to. But the tree had to be removed, and the homeowner was responsible for getting the roof fixed. I don't know if the people were renting or if they were buying a house. Regardless, whoever owned the house is responsible for the fixing of the roof. And that's, a lot of us are looking for the tree that fell on us to fix us. What happened to you may not have been your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. So we have to take up that mantle. And again, it's a process, it's work, it's not easy. Like you say, it's not pretty. That excavation that you talked about, and that made me think about how, Jesus talked about digging down. If you're going to build a house, dig down to a foundation. Yeah, you can quickly throw up a structure, but when hard times come, that foundation is going to be tested. But if you dug down and built on a rock, it'll be able to withstand. And sometimes we have to go back and in fact, we have to excavate those parts of our lives that are shaky, those parts of our lives that really need to be reinforced. I was reading an article about the Leaning Tower of Pisa and how they had to literally go down, and in order to keep it from falling over. Of course, it's a tourist attraction now, but they had to actually put concrete and rods on a portion that was leaning in order to keep it from falling over.
Yes, sir.
And even in our own lives, there is work that has to be done. Yes, I'm grown. I'm 50 something years old. But like you said earlier, that part of us, that child that's still in there, it needs attention. And I even talk about that in my book. I do an inner child checkup. In chapter 1, I actually introduce everybody to my inner child, who's Coney, because that's what my mom used to call me when she didn't want to say my full name, Saucony. She would just say Coney. Well, I gave my inner child that name, Coney. But everybody has to be able to actually go through that process of checking on that part of themselves that was unheard, abandoned, hurt, and nobody else can do it. Just like that house, I couldn't go over there. I could have gone over there and started fixing the roof, but they're like, "Who are you?"
Right.
But
right.
That wasn't my responsibility because that's not my house. And even in our own lives, we have to take with the mantle of that responsibility. Nobody can do it for us. Your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your husband, your wife, nobody can do it. You have to do it for yourself.
Absolutely.
And it is work, and it is a process. So,
absolutely.
All right, number 4 says, what do you believe is the biggest obstacle to inner child healing?
The capacity to deal with the damage.
Ooh. Okay, all right. Talk to me.
Can I deal with what I uncover?
Can
I?
Wow.
And after I deal with it, what's left? Because if this is something that, to your point, going back and revisiting Coney, right? My nickname as a kid was not as attractive as yours was. Yours was cute. My uncles called me Pickles. So it was, but going back and uncovering Pickles, right? Pickles wasn't a happy baby.
Mm.
You know, from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pickles grew up with the stigma of your mama killed your daddy. You know,
Wow.
Pickles grew up with a whole family that absolutely disregarded him because I was a junior, man. So when
Mm.
my dad died, I lost my name. I was no longer Larry C. Hill or Larry C. Milan Jr. I
Mm-hmm.
became another man's son. And so my grandmother, I'm gonna give you this real brief uh, kind of a explanation to this. I wrote
Right.
it in the book,
Mm-hmm.
but I would go visit my grandmother. She would say, "Hey, turn around," and I would be facing her like I'm looking at you, and
Mm-hmm.
she would say, "Turn around," and I would turn my back to her, and she would talk to me, and then she
What?
would say, "Now you can leave," and I would do it because I could only see her maybe once, maybe twice a year. And finally, I think I was maybe about 11, 12 years old. And I said, Granny, why every time you talk to me, you tell me to turn around? And she said, because you look too much like my son. So I can't stand to look at you.
Mm. Mm.
And what that did to me was my value and my worth were then desecrated to the point of I wasn't worthy of even being face to face with people.
Wow.
The truth of who I was no longer
Mm.
existed because here it is, my grandma couldn't even look at my face. Something was wrong with me. I accepted the fact that I was uh, uh, emotionally, mentally mutilated.
Mm.
So I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like the way I sounded. I didn't like my name. And so when you ask the question, it's like, what is really the damage
Mm.
of being mishandled, broken, abandoned as a child? What's left?
Mm.
It's a grown
Mm.
man. He got a job. He got an education,
Right.
but he's mutilated. So he mishandles everything.
Mm.
So when you get in there, you start uncovering, it's like, man, it ain't just a tree that fell on the house, to your point. It's
Mm-hmm.
the entire structure has to be fixed.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, it's like a car that gets in a car accident and it don't look too bad until they look at it and then they're like, oh my God, the frame is bent. You're
Right.
totaled. And I think a
Right.
lot of people don't want to have the conversation that you're totaled. But
Mm.
here's the good news. We
Okay.
serve a God, and I know this ain't your show, but we serve a God that has this ability to straighten out every crooked place in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every place that you feel mutilated and incapable and have no value and no worth, he straightens that out and he
Yeah.
fixes it through his grace and his love. And that's how I've been able to recover. But the long or the short is I think people are afraid of what they will uncover.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm giving you your props because that was definitely on point. Simply because a lot of us, we are afraid of what's down there. We are afraid of what's back there. We are afraid of what's under that bed or in that closet. We are afraid, and a lot of us we buried stuff. We have taken stuff and just pushed it away or pushed it out. I love what you said earlier about in fact suppression. A
Mhm.
lot of us we are good at suppressing that, but again, it's going to come back up. A lot of people think that they buried something, and honestly, they, they just planted it. They planted it, and it's going to take root, and it's going to grow. It's going to keep coming back. So yeah, man. And on a serious note, man, I appreciate again your transparency and your honesty of sharing those difficult moments. And I can't imagine what that did to you, but I know that on in fact this side of it, you are sharing your story, which is encouraging someone else. I had this lady on my podcast a couple of months ago. she actually talked about how when she was in school, a teacher put tape over her mouth
Mm.
in front of all of the other students, kind of like
Mm.
you can't talk. And she said
Mm.
just how that impacted her. Now, this was a teacher, this was somebody that she didn't know. Yes, it was an adult, but somebody that she didn't know. I can't imagine what having a family member to actually do that to you and tell you that. But see, as an adult, we also understand, or we should factor in their humanity
Mhm.
in how they dealt with it. Um, and in fact, not saying that it was right or it was wrong, but it was how they came up and they practiced. Which really brings us to our next question, which is: do you believe that people can do inner child therapy alone, or do they need some help, somebody to come in and help them to work through those processes?
You need help. This is my opinion. My opinion is you need help.
Okay.
Uh, I'm an example type of dude, Coney.
Hmm.
So please forgive me for giving
No,
examples of
no,
why I say
man,
that.
that's what we're here
Uh,
for. The
uh,
stories,
yeah, I don't do them canned yes no answers.
and we're glad. We want the
But
crock pot.
yeah, 100, man. You don't dig holes, to build houses with shovels.
Mm,
Don't work.
okay, okay,
You got to
okay.
bring in some heavy artillery. You got to bring in some stuff to move some dirt.
Yes,
And a
sir.
lot of that requires a combination plate. I grew up in the Midwest, and we call Chinese food combination plates because you get a little fried rice and sweet and sour chicken and two crab rangoons. But I'm saying that because it's the combination of all of those things. My personal opinion is you have to have a relationship with God. That's my relation. That's my opinion. Number
Right, I'm with
two,
you on that.
you have to have professional counseling um,
Mm,
that is unbiased, right? And
yes,
then number three, you have to be willing to be honest and deal with the ebbs and flows of that process, right?
mm,
That's my opinion. You
well,
said something that sparked. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, 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 no. Go ahead.
You said
Finish your
something
thought.
that sparked a memory. I did counseling. I had to do professional counseling, and I
Mm-hmm,
did professional counseling after um, a divorce,
mm-hmm,
and I was unable to understand the need and the capacity of love. I sought affirmation,
okay,
and I sought affirmation because I never got affirmed as a child. Right.
right, right,
My affirmation as a child was you act and you look just like your daddy. But my daddy did,
right.
right? My
Mm,
daddy, the only thing I know about my daddy is he used to beat the heck out of my mama, right? There are no good things that I know about this man. So
wow.
if the only affirming note that I hear about myself is I act like him, then that doesn't help me. So it pushed me to places and do things in my life that was all about being affirmed. Uh, and so when I went into therapy with God, with a non-biased, professional, certified therapist,
Right.
and being honest, I was able to bring all those things together, and it helped me start unveiling and dealing with the truth of who I was and who God made me to be. But this is not something you can do by yourself, in my opinion. I think you need help. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten several answers back to that question from my guests, and in fact, most of them has. Well, in fact, they have that same answer, but some will start. Okay, you can start it on your own, and it really depends on, in fact, the level of trauma and what I could. Because sometimes all we need to do is just talk to a good friend. But if it's that deep, if it's that serious, if it's that traumatic, yeah. In fact, because even a person that needs the help, if they're not ready for the help, then the help won't help them. So they have to come to a place in themselves to where they say, okay, I need some help. And I was sharing with somebody the other day. I'm the type of person, I'm going to try everything I can on my own, and I'm going to come to the end of myself. And after
Mhm.
that, I become the best student because I'm not arguing with you. I'm not trying to correct you because I know I've done everything I know. Now I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to
Mhm.
get the skills that I need in order for me to move forward and in order for me to be better. But I had to start the process. I wasn't just in the line in the grocery store and the therapist came to me and said, "Hey, look, you got some childhood issues. We need to talk about it." No, that didn't happen. I had to through life's experience, I had to recognize and acknowledge that, hey, there's some stuff that I need to work on. And
Mhm.
like you, I got that professional help. And I'm still in the process, because it's just that it's a process. But if we waited until we were completely healed, we would wind up not sharing anything. And I remember several years ago, I was the MC for an event in Phoenix, and I actually talked about. I asked the question. I said, "Are you healed enough to help celebrate someone else and help them glow?" Just because no one is clapping for you or singing your praises, if they're doing it for somebody else, but you have an issue with it, that shows something in you that's not. You're not healed enough. And again, not saying that we're perfect, not saying that we're totally healed, but because if we wait until that point to even write a book or do a podcast, none of us will ever write or do anything.
Mhm. Mhm.
But when we've learned that, okay, I know God has given me something I can share with the world. I haven't perfected it, I haven't mastered it, but I'm in the process. I'm on this journey. And that's what we have to look at our life and our healing as, which is a journey for us to get again to a better space and a better place in life. So
So that's what this book. I have to do a plug. Just because
go
you
ahead.
set me up. This book right here is called Overcomers Only: Man in Progress,
Okay.
and we call it Man in Progress because get rid of the perfection expectation
Mm,
and embrace the grace of progress. Embrace the grace that you're always going to be. The Bible talks about the perfecting church. It's something that's always happening.
right.
It's the same thing in us, right? When we're perfect, we see Jesus.
Mm. Yeah, that's it. You know, check that.
So my life is, I'm not living to be perfect. I'm living to be, to your point, healed enough to deal with the flaws, right? I'm
Mm,
I'm I'm healed enough so you can see the transparency of what was broken and
right.
also what was fixed,
Right.
right? I'm healed enough to walk in that space, right? You said glow up, celebrate people. I
Yeah.
I want to add this comma, this nugget to that. The difference between me searching out or trying to do it myself, real talk, bro, is I had lived an exhausted life.
Mm,
It
wow.
wasn't just I had come to the end of myself. I had lived an exhausted life. That's why I wrote this book. This book is not just about what happened with my mom and my dad. It's all these other things that had happened as a result of that childhood situation, right? So
Right.
childhood goes bad, bad decision, bad decision, bad decision, bad decision, bad decision,
Domino
bad
effect.
decision, bad decision, worst
Right.
decision, horrible decision, right? So now it's
Mm,
like I'm at this place of exhaustion. There are some
mm,
people that can say, hey, you know what? I can start this journey by yourself. And then there's some people that say, I need to go to the doggone emergency room because I'm dying.
yes. Yes.
Some people
Yes.
can go to urgent care. Some people go straight to ICU. And that
Exactly.
was me.
Exactly. Exactly.
This was not here's your Theraflu plaque. Your 7 day, take this and you'll be all right. No,
Right.
this was, you need an IV, you need a blood transfusion, you need
Mm,
no. And so to your point, sometimes um when you've lived with these things for so long, you've
mm,
normalized them.
yes.
And
Yes.
then one day you're just tapped.
Mm,
Just out of nowhere, you're just done. You done with the world, right? And
Wow.
so every fleeting thought that you could possibly have, they interrupt your stability, they interrupt your peace. And you start thinking things like, you know what? Is it better that I take myself out? Is it
Mm,
better that I leave here? Would anybody miss me? Would anybody even realize that he was hurting or she was hurting or this affected them? And then the enemy gets in your brain, and before you know it, you've taken a whole different turn.
right,
And
right.
to your point, friend, it starts because we never deal with that first foundational broken building block, which is that baby, that child.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Man, listen, this has been an amazing podcast. But before we get out of here, I got to run my ad again for our sponsor. But after we come back, I want you to tell people how they can stay connected with you and how they can actually get a copy of your book. I'm telling you, man, this has been just a treasure for me. But we want to thank our sponsor of this podcast, none other than BetterHelp. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/SaconiPrinceHeal. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who's had years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or your computer, via a phone call, a video chat, or messaging. However you feel most comfortable. It is the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started fast. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/SaconiPrinceHeal or choose Saconi Prince Heal during your sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. And again, we want to thank BetterHelp for being the sponsor of this amazing episode. And I can't help but give my props to my guest today, none other than Larry C. Hill Sr. Again, man, just a phenomenal podcast, a phenomenal testimony. And so tell people about how they can get your book and how they can stay connected with you.
Absolutely. So thank you so much again for having me. You've been an amazing host. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, my name is Larry C. Hill Sr. And this is my book, Overcomers Only. You can find me at maninprogress.net is my website, maninprogress.net. You'll find more information about me. And we actually have a podcast that we will be launching in June. So Sakoni, I'll be having you on my podcast.
For
It
sure.
is called Man in Progress. You can follow us on YouTube, Man in Progress Pod. And then also on all social media, specifically on Instagram, Man in Progress Pod. And then also this book is available on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble. But we are so excited about this opportunity. We're so excited about the grace of God that rests upon this project and these kingdom relationships that we're having the opportunity to build. So thank you again, my friend, for having me on. And we appreciate any support that you guys would offer us.
Yeah, you are so welcome. So listen, if you had one thing to say, one last word, one final word for our listeners, what would it be?
Childhood issues, while they may be hidden, are worth finding.
Mm. Now that's props. Now that's props. That's they are worth finding. And yes, in fact, they may be hidden, but they are worth finding. And because that's the starting process to healing. You know, I remember hearing Dr. Phil say that you can't fix what you won't face, and you can't face it if you don't find it. But finding it takes some work, but you also have to be prepared for the results. And I loved your answer to that question. You know, like what you find, that's the biggest obstacle. You know, and sometimes it is overwhelming, but it's worth the work.
Yes.
And listen, before we get out of here, I have to remind everybody because I also do. I do fact, motivational speaking. I do personal development and, in fact, leadership development. So I've been closing out our show with none other than my sizzle reel. So I want to thank you. Listen, for those who are watching this on YouTube, you can actually share. For those who are listening on iHeartRadio and Spotify, you can also do the same. And go and subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, we'll see you then. Well, my name is Saucony Prince of SauconyPrince.com, where we make motivation personal by introducing you to yourself. I'm a motivational speaker, a trainer, and a coach. I'm also an author. I help people in the area of personal development and leadership development because I believe that you can't lead others until you learn how to lead yourself. But once you learn how to lead yourself, the next logical step is that you lead other people.
Saucony Prince is the best keynote I've ever seen.
He really encouraged me so much.
He has this ability of seeing in people what they don't see in themselves.
He was so confident. When he was coming to the stage, you could see like, wow, this is a lion.
Any actor that's going for a role, they do a case study. If I'm going to be a fry cook, I go to a restaurant and watch people that are fry cooks. If I'm going to be a mob boss, I go and, well, maybe not go to with them, but you take some notes as to what they do. Our children are watching us. What can they reference when they step into our shoes? I do what I do because I believe that people have truly yet to understand their purpose. Once you know who you are, nothing can stop you. But until you know who you are, anything can. So my goal is to really help people to understand their purpose and their calling. And oftentimes they have the answers themselves, but they're not asking the right questions. So I help people to get to that place to where they look at themselves, they step back and they see how they've been a help to those around them and what really drives them. And from that, they really understand the value of it. They learn to value their value and see what value their value brings. Because a lot of people, they have yet to do that. Until you know who you are, anything can stop you. But once you know who you are, nothing can stop you. I want you to understand that you are blessed. That you are blessed to be a blessing. That there is somebody looking up to you. They're looking at you. Don't ever forget that. Because if you ever do, you're going to leave them without a mind.
I've learned so much and I've experienced a lot of interactions with people.
The practical approach, like you can't just sit down there. You have to walk up to an opportunity. Sometimes you have to grab the opportunity. Sometimes you have to fight for the opportunity. There's so much life lessons.
I think from today onwards, I'll stretch out and reach to higher levels.